So you can't talk about human sacrifice without talking about the non-human element to it. And you can't talk about that without talking about reality and how it really works and why we live in a simulation and what's created the simulation. All these dots have to come together to truly explain a human sacrifice. So it became clear to me as my research unfolded that not only is this reality manipulated from the unseen by a non-human force, a non-human race, species, whatever, in fact, multiple species. But these non-human entities feed off human energy, but it's a particular type of energy. It's low vibrational, emotional, and thought, mental energy. So, and this is mainstream science. Every time we feel an emotion or have a thought, we're giving off frequencies. And the nature of the frequency relates to the nature of the thought. So fear, which is the big controlling mechanism of the human population, is and offshoots of fear like anxiety, depression, resentment, regret, hatred, all these things. They are low, slow frequencies, whereas joy and love are high frequencies. And so the nature of this non-human force, which operates just outside the hidden, just outside the scene, rather, in the hidden, and just to make it clear, because this fact should be communicated to all children at the earliest age that they can grasp it. And that is when we look through our eyes, or think we do, we are not seeing everything that exists in the space we're looking at. What we're seeing is a narrow, laughably narrow band of frequency called visible light. So let's put that into perspective, because when you talk about the unseen, people say, well, where's the unseen then? Because I can see everything there is to see. Well, actually, you can't. You can hardly see anything. According to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum, which is basically our reality, our experienced reality, is 0.005% of what exists in the universe in terms of energy in all its forms. And visible light, which is the only band of frequency that we can see, unless you have psychic abilities, the only band of frequency you can see with our sight senses is visible light, and that is a fraction of the 0.005%. So humans can basically see nothing, just this narrow band of frequency. So the idea that there are entities operating outside of that band, which are manipulating our reality within that band through this global cult, is not too much of a stretch, to say the least, once you realize the narrow band that we can actually see. So these entities, by their very nature, their desire to control, their desire to impose, their desire to manipulate, they are in a low frequency state. Because if they were in a high frequency state, an expanded consciousness state, they wouldn't want to do any of that. They're psychopaths, which is a very low frequency state. So if they're going to feed off human energy, human emotional and mental energy, then they have to manipulate humans to produce energy within the band of frequency that they can absorb. Otherwise, like radio stations on different wavelengths, they can't absorb it. So this virtual reality simulation that I talk about, and more scientists talk about, has been created to entrap our perception of reality and our perception of self, and to be manipulated so that the human population is in a constant state of fear, anxiety, depression. The more wars and suffering and deprivation you can have, the better. They're not bothered why we fear things as long as we do, because then we're giving off that energy. And so we have to be manipulated into these low frequency states. And that's why the world is as it is. That's why if you have a conversation with people anywhere in the world and you say, do you want a war? They'd say, oh, no. The vast majority will say, no, we don't want a war. So why do we have them one after the other, after the other, after the other? Because they're manipulated to happen by this global cult that represents in our reality this non-human force. So let's take that background and come round to human sacrifice. I noted, first of all, that the ancients used to sacrifice people, not least children. There's a reason for that as well. Openly, often openly, because it was kind of acceptable to them. And it was done as an offering to the gods. So my question then was, okay, so who are these gods? And then as I'm researching the rich and famous of the global cult, many of which appear on the television all the time, I started to realize that there was a common theme between them, and that was Satanism and pedophilia, because those two are connected. And so why do they get involved in that? Because they're psychopaths and they're stupid because they're psychopaths, but then they are not going to worship, quote, gods in their satanic rituals that don't exist. They're not. And then of course, the obvious thing starts to occur to you, that the gods of the ancient world, to which they were sacrificing people as an offering to the gods, were actually the same gods that these people are worshipping today in their satanic rituals. And I've talked to people who have taken part in satanic rituals all over the world who have confirmed this. And so there came a point where human sacrifice was no longer acceptable. And it went from being openly done to being secretly done, which it is today. And then you look around the world and you see all these different pantheons of gods, all these different cultures and backgrounds. They have different versions of the gods. And you realize they're actually all the same gods, like the Greek pantheon and all this. My next question was, okay, they're making an offering, a sacrifice offering to the gods, but why? What do the gods get out of this? And then you realize, again, you've got to connect the dots to put the picture together, that what they do in these rituals is, and this is why even today they're following the same ritualistic patterns and sequences that you would have seen you would have had in Babylon and Egypt and the ancient world. Because what they're doing is they are creating terror in the victim, building up the terror so they get maximum terror from the victim. And what that terror is an extremely powerful, low vibrational energy being projected. And, when someone's, for instance, in an emotional state, you can see with their body language the kind of emotional experience they're having. Like they might scream or whatever. So you can see in the body language. if you are sensitive to energy, you can feel those frequencies and coming off them, and you can gather on another level how they're feeling. But you can't see the frequencies. You can't see them. And the reason you can't see them is because they're outside of our human perception. They're going into this astral dimension. That's where these frequencies are actually going. And that's where these entities are feeding off the terror coming off the victim. And this is how it becomes an offering to the gods, because they're feeding off that terror. And what then happens is in the human level, if you like, that terror frequency creates a chemical change in the body, which releases adrenaline into the blood. And the Satanists who are taking part in the ritual, interacting with their gods, making the offering to their gods, they then drink the blood, which contains this adrenaline. This is where these references to adrenochrome come from. It's like a drug to these people because they're crazy. And so you've got this double experience, if you like, where the astral, quote, gods, who are plasma in nature, they are absorbing the frequencies of terror. And the Satanists actually in the ritual, in this reality, are drinking the chemical reaction to the terror. And that's what it's all about. And I met a wonderful man called Credo Mutwa, who he died well into his 90s. I spent long hours with him, days with him over the years in South Africa. And he was the Zulu historian and a high Zulu shaman. And they have the same legends and accounts about the unseen gods, as I've found all over the world. But what he told me is that human sacrifice and cannibalism was introduced to human society way back, obviously, by these entities, which can enter what we call visible light, so people could see them, but it's very rare because obviously they want to remain hidden.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's a very